Um, I would like to say hi to everybody, and as I don't know from which country you have participated, I would like to say warmly good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and maybe good night to you. Here in this conference presentation, we are two researchers actually. I'm the second one, and we are both working at two public universities in the same city, Trabzon. I am a faculty staff member working at Karadeniz Technical University Department of English Language and Literature, and Dr. Servet Çelik is the head of department at the English language teaching at Trabzon University in the same city, Trabzon in Turkey. We conducted a research to find out what pre-service teachers about the cultural representations in locally devised English language teaching textbooks in Turkey, and to find out whether they find this cultural scope and content enough to develop intercultural communicative competence. The research was about textbook, the cultural scope of textbook. So I guess it's logical to start with textbook. Of course, I don't want to suffocate you a lot with theoretical information. As you know, textbooks are important for instruction, whether it is language or other field, but particularly for English language teaching, textbook play a crucial role. We listed some reasons, some reasons why they are important, their roles, in other words. Textbook are regarded as the language teaching content. Teachers depend on them, and teachers tend to teach what these textbooks offer to them. Besides, these textbooks offer various classroom activities. They guide teachers and offer them ideas and plus materials to offer to students. Plus, they tend to guide teachers about their classroom teaching, management, maybe sometimes assessment and evaluation. And these textbooks also play as a reference point for both teachers and students. Well, the information they offer are learned by learners and taught by teachers. And besides, textbooks are really time saver. They offer the content to teach, they offer activities, and they guide teachers, so they save time for teachers. Besides, following a textbook ensures a standardized language instruction, because everybody does the same thing and in the end follow the same procedure, and it becomes easy to guide everybody and observe everybody and evaluate their performance then. Lastly, textbooks help teachers to encourage their students to go on learning English outside classroom borders. For example, you may ask them to do homework and or to learn, let's say, do extra research, and here textbooks guide them, and they mainly use textbook to do that. And with workbooks, for example, they practice what they have learned in the classroom. Textbooks are very important, and also their cultural scope is very important. Why? Because here course books serves as cultural objects, because they have a very important place for teachers and learners, and the cultural content they offer automatically becomes cultural object for teacher. And this cultural content is the main cultural input that teachers offer to their students during a language teaching. And because of that, I mean, as it is the main cultural content, as they offer the main cultural content to teach, their insufficient or partial, improper cultural content definitely harms students' cultural development, cultural awareness, and intercultural communicative competence. And because of that, textbooks could be a real obstacle, a real burden to effectively integrate ICC, intercultural communicative competence, into teaching. Because if they have an partial and problematic cultural content, teachers teach them because they rely on them, and automatically you transfer this to your students, and then problems arise. Here, when we say the cultural scope of textbook, what should we understand from the culture in textbook? Well, culture is a complex term, and there are different categorization and definitions and metaphors to describe its nature. Here, we have found a nice table that shows the interjunctions between levels of culture that belongs to Peterson. And there is a well-known metaphor, cultural metaphor, that likens culture to an iceberg, because here we see the tip of the iceberg, but there is its bottom part, and this bottom part is larger than the tip. On the other hand, there are other categorizations like big C culture and little c culture. Here, big C culture are the classic grand themes like, I don't know, some architectural issues, geographical issues, or classical literature, some, let's say, political figures. On the other hand, the little c cultures are some common themes, minor themes like gestures, food, music, and etc. So these minor issues are generally at the tip of the iceberg, and they are easily seen. However, at the bottom, I mean, there are some very important issues. So coursebook should cover both of them. I mean, when we say that the cultural scope of the coursebook should be broad, and we mean that it should cover both tip of the iceberg and bottom of the iceberg, and also big C culture and little c culture. Here, two terms come into play, and these are cultural awareness and intercultural communicative competence. When we say cultural awareness, we should understand a particular type of awareness about the role of culture. I mean, its role in interpreting meaning. And also, it's an awareness that goes beyond fact. I mean, it's about interpretation. It's about meaning. And also, here, cultural awareness refers to the ability to compare and contrast the similarities, and to talk about, to interpret the differences and similarities between cultures. And also, it's an awareness of the relative nature of cultural norms. Cultural norms are important, and understanding and interpreting them is vital. And also here, this is an awareness of how individuals relate to cultures, and also cultural awareness is vital to use the skills of intercultural communication. Well, This is the ultimate goal, intercultural communication. So here we have another related term, which is Intercultural Communicative Competence, ICC. Bayram, a well-known figure in this field, defines ICC as ability to ensure a shared understanding by people of different social identities and their ability to interact with people as complex human beings with multiple identities and their own individuality. Here, in Bayram's well-known model, there are types of skills, and we have intercultural attitudes, I mean openness, tolerance. These attitudes are important. And also there's intercultural knowledge. Besides, there are skills, and these are divided into skills of comparison, interpreting and relating, skills of discovery and interaction, and critical cultural awareness. So this is a really deep issue, but the aim of English language textbooks should be to increase cultural awareness of students and to enhance their intercultural communicative competence. Here, teachers play a great role because they have teaching materials in their hand and they need to understand, be aware whether their materials develop these two important vital skills in the 21st century. So we say that language teachers need to be effective and effective materials evaluated who are aware of these issues. Here, there is a danger. The textbooks with a partial cultural scope or improper, insufficient cultural content definitely result in failure in the development of ICC, because if the content is partial and inappropriate and the books do not offer appropriate activities to enhance that particular skill, then automatically your students will not have that skill, will not be equipped with that skill. So here, the teachers' awareness about that potential risk and the importance of equipping them with critical skills to evaluate and supplement and modify when necessary is important. So we need to understand, and teachers need to understand the internal character of course book regarding the cultural scope, because as Little John says, in that way, here you could voice, teachers could voice their needs and to take more control over the materials with which they are involved. In contexts like Turkey, teachers are in public sector are handed in their textbooks, and these are devised by the Ministry of National Education, and teachers do not have a saying about their textbook. However, if we know how to evaluate it, and if they know how to if they understand their internal character, then they could express their voice and they could maybe start a bottom-up process for the design of more appropriate books with effective cultural input. So here, let me talk about our investigation. So this is what the existing literature says shortly. So here, what did we do? We talk about the importance of textbook and teacher awareness. So here in this study, we aimed at understanding the pre-service teachers' views regarding how culture is represented in locally devised ELT textbooks in Turkey, and also we aimed at exploring whether they believe that these in-country textbooks helped the development of ICC. And the setting of that research was the university of the first researcher. And here we had 24 juniors, I mean pre-service teachers enrolled in the English language teaching program at that university. And these students have language and culture courses like language and culture and English language textbook evaluation at the time when we collected the data in the fall 2021. And how we collected our data? We devised our questions and asked the students to fill in and send their responses in the form of let's say kind of essay through Google Docs. And the text data, we analyzed the text data utilizing conventional content analysis. Here we derive the categories directly from the text data, and then we interpret the meaning together with the first researcher. Now I would like to share our results. What did we find? Well, the first question was whether they find the cultural scope and content and representations of locally devised textbooks, how they find it. And we had 24 participants, and 22 out of 24 participants describe these books with limited, superficial, partial, and inadequate cultural representation. So they were negative about the cultural representations of these books. And they listed several reasons for this negative picture. They said that these textbooks mostly cover surface and visible cultural elements, and such as some elements like food, festivals, tourism, signs, figures, people. So these are visible and surface level cultural elements, which are the tip of the iceberg. And also they, well, while saying that they tend to compare this with some international books, they compared and said that these international course books are more successful as they offer more deep cultural content. Also, they criticize these books, saying that they adopt a knowledge and events-oriented cultural representation at a primary visual level. I mean, the cultural content, well, they have surface level culture, and they have not enough cultural content. Besides, the existing ones are generally at visual level and events and knowledge level. I mean, they do not ask students to critically evaluate them and use that knowledge and practice that knowledge, let's say. And also, they criticize this book saying that they have a skewed cultural representation towards the European ones. I mean, they said that, okay, the existing cultural elements are mostly about European countries like Germany, France, Britain, but the other cultures like Asian ones, or the cultures in the Middle Eastern part, or I don't know, some outer and expanding circle cultures are neglected and are not shown in these books. So they have a skewed cultural representation. Besides, they said that culture is used as a tool to teach vocabulary and reading, rather than teach it as a rather than behaving it as a learning objective. And also they said that there is much focus on Turkish culture. I mean, there is no cultural variety, and cultural variety means the English-speaking cultures and the Turkish culture, and there is much focus on the Turkish culture. And also they realized that these books lack authenticity. I mean, they don't show how English is used in real world in natural style. So the conversations are all made up, the texts are all made up, and they lack authenticity. And also they criticizes these books and said that their designers are Turkish designers, materials designers, and most probably they do not have abroad experience, cultural experience. Therefore, they can't present culture as a live, let's say, phenomena. Rather, they just put it as a written information, offer it as a written information at knowledge level, at exposure level. And also some criticizes Turkish society and said that Turkish society is not open-minded and globally sensitive, and therefore they are not ready to see cultural values, and because of that maybe textbook designers do not cover such materials in the textbook. We also asked the participants whether the cultural representations, whether the cultural scope of these local textbooks enhance students' ICC, and 23 students out of 24 were found negative about that. I mean, they listed several reasons. Well, we identify several reasons here. We saw that they said that the cultural content lacks authenticity, as I explained before. The conversations, the texts are all about made up ones, and they don't show how real English is used in the world. And also, these cultural content fail to create a meaningful relationship between home and target cultures. I mean, the activities, the content do not encourage students to compare and contrast or to associate Turkish culture and the other cultures. They are separate from each other. And also they criticize the cultural content, saying that they cannot see cultural elements that belong to various countries. I mean, there are certain countries, certain cultures, but they prefer to see some other cultures that belong to external and other circles. And also they said that as the cultural content is at surface level, it's far from enhancing ICC, because ICC requires deeper level competences. And also, as these books cover certain cultures at exposure level, they cannot enhance ICC. The participants also highlight the importance of the teaching approach of the book, as they teach, as they behave culture as a tool to teach other skills like vocabulary and reading. Naturally, these elements can't enhance ICC. And also they found the culture-related activities boring and insufficient to enhance ICC, because they are only at primarily at visual level and also knowledge level. The aim is to expose students to cultural information, not encourage them to practice, to transfer what they learn into practice. And they said that the books do not cover cultural interactions. I mean, and do not teach students how to engage in these interactions, which is an important skill, which could be an important skill for them in the future. And besides, they believe that the books need to cover more visuals, and also they said that the cultures is not portrayed in a balanced level. I mean, while some units cover some cultural and intercultural issues like food or science or celebrations or I don't know, the other units do not cover any cultural or intercultural content. And so such books automatically can't enhance ICC. And also several identified several gender stereotypes in the books. I mean, they said that the females are portrayed mainly having domestic roles, and these gender stereotypes are dangerous as a hidden curriculum. But still, although most of them were, maybe all of them were negative about these books, still several of them see gradual improvement in their cultural policies. But still, we identify several suggestions to idealize the cultural content of these locally devised course book. And we listed them here like that. They said that teachers need to be encouraged to teach the cultural content. I mean, the books could be maybe perfect. However, if the few teachers are hesitant to teach them, or if they were negative about the importance of integrating culture into teaching, then automatically you will fail in equipping students with these skills. Also, they said that these textbooks should offer audio-visual culture-related materials, and also they said that they should cover more drama-based cultural activities. I mean, they criticize the activities that mainly serve well for teaching vocabulary and reading. However, they need to encourage students to practice these skills, I mean, engage in interaction. So such drama-based activities could help teachers to enhance ICC skills. And also they said that this intercultural content should be in a balanced way. I mean, all units, all modules should cover them. And also they said that the cultural activities should be diversified. I mean, the aim should not be solely about reading or vocabulary, and students should be encouraged to act out what they have learned. And also they wanted these course books to cover more non-verbal behavior. I mean, rather than these easily visible cultural elements, they express their wish to see more non-verbal behavior in diverse cultures, which automatically helps them, the students, to have successful intercultural communication. Here we shared a representative participant expert that belongs to a female participant, and we highlighted the important codes here. Let me read it for you. I do not think that the textbooks prepared by the Turkish Ministry of National Education and distributed to students free of charge provide cultural information sufficiently. You see, the student is negative. I mean, as most of the participants said, negative about the cultural scope, cultural representations of books. Although they try to include cultural factors in the textbooks by preparing the units around cultural issues, it's not at sufficient level. So it's not sufficient. When we examine the books, she gives an examples, we can see food and festivals, which are in that unit, touch on different cultures. However, these units do not go beyond introducing the contents of different cultures to the students under the topic title and cannot touch on the cultural elements that students may encounter every day. So they don't find these elements, these topics enough. For example, the audio recordings prepared for the listening activities of the books do not include enough different accents and non-native speakers. So they want to see different accents in books. It would be a mistake to assume that the people our students will communicate will always speak with the same accent or only be native speakers. The participant touches the international role of English. Our students learning about the differences when speaking English in different cultures will distract them from the feeling of learning monotonous and uniform information and prepare them for the situations they will encounter in the future. So they believe that the textbook should prepare students for future intercultural interactions. Since the books distributed by the state are insufficient to provide students with intercultural communication competence, many teachers make their students buy books prepared by different primary foreign publishers. I believe that even when a textbook offers students a simple dialogue about renting an apartment or going out with friends, it should also present vocabulary and terminology that are used differently in different cultures on this topic. So the students, the participants, that participant wants to see comparisons between, contrasts between cultures to enhance ICC. Shortly, briefly, we found that the participants find the cultural content of the course book superficial and somehow distorted. And thus, they have limited potential to develop ICC. And they also voice the need for a better variety of activities. Activities should be various, diverse to promote ICC. They should not aim only at teaching vocabulary and enhancing reading, rather more interactive activities need to be included in the books. Well, these findings are in line with the recurrent results in the related literature. I mean, when we look at the existing literature, we found that textbook analysis studies found that textbooks are mostly with visible and surface level cultural materials, such as holidays, places to visit, food and drinks, literary and artistic works, famous people, tradition, customs, historical information. So there is a tourist perspective in course book, and the students, the participants here, managed to identify that perspective and problematized it. And also the literature says that textbooks have hierarchical world cultural representation. Some of the participants touched on these issues, highlighting the skewed representations of cultural representations. They dominantly represent European cultures. Also, the literature says that textbooks have knowledge and are knowledge and awareness oriented, and thus such an orientation can't enhance ICC. And most of the students highlighted that fact. They said that the activities only are visual level and they aim at increasing students' knowledge about cultures. However, they should encourage them to use skills in interactions. And also the literature shows that textbooks have a limited range of cultural topics. The students, the participants said almost the same thing. They believe that the cultural topics should be diversified. However, our findings are contrary to some of the findings which found the ignorance of local culture in ELT course book. For example, Viskulova, Kırkgöz, Taceddin, and Teymur Nezat have that finding. However, our participants argued that the existing course book focus on Turkish culture much, and they felt unhappy with that. Besides, they said that the relationship between local culture and international cultures cannot be set successfully. And the first author and I now have a book chapter which is planned to be published this year, and it's in press, and there we have share some techniques to compensate the interculturally problematic course book coverages. I would like to share some of them with you. Here, teachers' awareness about the cultural content, scope of textbook is very important. So they should be trained about how to evaluate what they have at hand. They could be taught how to use checklist and to analyze the course materials, and then how to supplement and modify them. And this education, this training should be given during teacher preparation, pre-service teacher education. However, this can't ensure 100% success still. And also, internet is a rich source, and teachers should be shown how to utilize internet sources to supplement their materials. There are really nice websites like blogs and formal government websites and YouTube. So these could be integrated into classes to compensate the partial cultural level of the cultural scope of the textbook. And here, the culturally problematic coursebook coverages also should be shown teachers. I mean, it should be shown how to turn these problematic coverages into a chance to enhance ICC. And here, well, it's something like that. Life may give them a lemon, and they could make lemonade out of that lemon. So the problematic activities could be turned into nice ones or appropriate ones with the students together. I mean, in this way, you could increase their awareness and cultural awareness and enhance their intercultural communicative competence. And also here, teachers should tend to compare and contrast the familiar and unfamiliar. For example, a text may be about, I saw that example somewhere. I mean, that belongs to Sandra Limakke. She says that a reading text could cover what Americans do with old goods. They put their old goods in front of their houses so that the ones who need them could take them. So this text could be an American-oriented one. However, teachers should be shown how to turn this into a contrastive one. I mean, here teachers may ask the students what Turkish people do with their old stuff, and then as a homework, they may ask them to search for a third culture to see what these people do with old stuff, and maybe prepare a presentation, a brochure, or I don't know, a story, a poster. So teachers should show how to compare and contrast the familiar and unfamiliar here and turn the class into an intercultural sphere. And thank you for listening. And these are our references. And again, we are happy to see you here, to have you here. Thank you.